Welcome to Implicating the Real. My name is Michael. This is a podcast where every week we tie Joe up, machine gun him full of idealism bullets, and watch him refuse to succumb. Joe, are you up for it once again today?
I'm so excited for this chapter.
Yeah, I don't think, maybe that preamble doesn't apply to this chapter so much, but
we got a fun one.
Yeah. Liana, how are you?
Great.
Good.
I'm excited.
Good to have smart friends to talk Seth with. Today is chapter 15, Reincarnational Civilizations, Probabilities, and More on the Multidimensional God.
Bad title. It should just be titled.
Yeah, it's misleading.
All caps, 3 exclamations.
Yeah. It's true. In fact, so Lumanians is the name of a previous civilization. We'll get into it. But previous times I've read this, or I've probably listened to it more than read it, the Lumanians just dominate the subject matter so much that I kind of miss some of the other stuff. So it was good to review it, and I picked up on more of that today.
My entire mind is dominated now by Lumanians.
Yeah. So I think this has been a theme lately, but the first paragraph just kind of gets us right there, which makes a lot of sense. It's good writing. In a manner of speaking, it can be said that you have reincarnational civilizations as well as reincarnating individuals. Each entity who is born in flesh works toward the development of those abilities that can be best nurtured and fulfilled within the physical environment. He has a responsibility to and for the civilization in which he has each existence, for he helps form it through his own thoughts, emotions, and actions. Do the next one quick too. He learns from failure as well as success. You think of physical history as beginning with the caveman and continuing up to the present, but there have been other great scientific civilizations. Some spoken of in legend, some completely unknown, all in your terms now vanished. So one of the things that I missed in previous readings was he's just basically saying that in the same way individuals reincarnate, civilizations kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that quote a lot. It's very poetic. There's the concept sort of that floats around about how no matter what time period you live in, it's always the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
To be a part of a civilization is to be a part of something that's continually rebirthing itself to the point where even imagining what a prior age would have been is sort of impossible, because it always has that quality of you had to have been there, sort of.
Yeah. It's easier to see how individuality would always reign. You almost can't imagine anything being exactly the same when it's something like that complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the explication of the Lumanian civilization itself really shows how just a tiny little different focus can change everything almost. Yeah, that's cool. And then also Seth, I think he hints somewhere here, he usually does with individual reincarnation, but that because of the nature of the time, these other civilizations are also not necessarily in our past as he says they are according to our terms. We can actually tap into these in the same way we can tap into our future and past selves.
Yeah, it's kind of how people talk about there's cultures where they have the idea of mythic time, where mythic time is often talked about in the way far past, in the early days, in the beginning times, but how mythic time has the weird property of being both in the past but not temporally situated. So it sort of also permeates and surrounds the present.
Yeah. It's almost it's a disservice to attempt to place it in a continuity or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's more symbolical than linear, temporal.
I like this next paragraph too. It seems to you that you have perhaps but one chance as a species to solve your problems or be destroyed by your own aggression, by your own lack of understanding and spirituality. As you are given many lives in which to develop and fulfill your abilities, so has the species in those terms been allotted more than a single line of historical development with which you are presently acquainted. The reincarnational structure is but one facet in the whole picture of probabilities. In it, you have literally as much time as you need to develop those potentials that you must develop before leaving the reincarnational existences. Groups of people in various cycles of reincarnational activity have met crisis after crisis, have come to your point of physical development and either gone beyond it or destroyed by their particular civilization. It's just like, I don't feel like we normally ever allow our belief system to get us in this mode of thinking of like other technological civilizations in this way.
I think a lot of it is because people just assume that with technological innovation comes like the solving of all problems.
Yeah.
But it's never going to be like that. Not to be pessimistic, but I mean, like, I know I bring up this analogy a lot of like Earth or physical reality being a school, but it wouldn't make sense for you to enroll in a school where it's just like easy days where, you know, it's like that. Sorry, Joe, but like when I used to have substitute teachers, they would just roll in the TV and we just watch something and not really do much. But like school is not like that. You always have a challenge. There's always something new to learn and tackle. So it would only make sense that like if individuals reincarnate, then of course civilizations would too, because they're still learning to solve the same problem.
Yeah.
Or like a similar group of problems.
Yeah, and I think the other reason, like, we're so obsessed with like physical and material evidence, and I'm assuming that it's by design that these like reincarnations of civilization are spread out through history enough that there's not like great evidence. Like he talks a little bit about, you know, some like artwork like surviving through, but what doesn't survive is this like advanced way of like understanding it.
Right.
So they're like separated in a way that we don't have physical evidence of like a previous technological civilization.
Yeah. And that's sort of one thing, like from sort of an archaeological like standpoint, that's sort of an interesting way of thinking about it, is this idea that like civilizations can be destroyed, but like what civilization like means is sort of this idea of like a certain sort of structured kind of ossified like form of living. And that when you're living in a civilization that is sort of like held itself up for a while, it feels like that's just what the world is. And like that's what people are and that's what society is. But we have a lot of examples of societies and civilizations disintegrating, right? And like the people don't go away when that happens. The material culture changes.
You're right.
And like we sort of live in a paradigm right now where we see technological civilization as a paradigm. So when we look at material culture, that's what we look for. And it's the whole like kind of concept of doing archaeology sort of gears you towards that, right? Because like a civilization that produces a lot of monuments is one that can be studied.
Yeah, what survives through time and then gets the main focus.
Like we'll talk about it in a little bit, but like this idea of like, well, there was this one civilization and they were super advanced, and then around them was a bunch of, you know, wild barbarian people. And it's like, well, wild barbarian people don't leave material for you to study, or they don't leave as much material, you know?
Right.
Like if they're using like animal parts or they're using like wood tools and stuff, it's like they could have very complex, very like highly developed civilizations in a certain sense, but like not in a sense that's archaeologically viable to study, you know?
It's kind of like the plane armor thing.
What's that?
Like the sampling of evidence, you know? And,
yeah, exactly.
But in this sense, there's just like, it's not about like looking in the right direction. It's just like that doesn't exist for some things.
Yeah, sometimes the evidence just is not there to do an analysis. So it like sort of colors your view. And it's like it's a fun accident that it tends to work very well with our sort of society's biases towards technological development, you know?
Yeah. I really like that idea you brought up of like, we think of a civilization like beginning and dying, but like the people live on. I think it relates to what Seth is trying to get at with telling us that like ideas are actually alive. Because like what is the part that actually lived and died there? It was like the ideas that informed this particular culture, its individuality as a culture.
Yeah.
this is going to be the most random thing, but like 2 weeks ago, I was wondering, the just the SAT verbal section just be really hard for me. I wonder now if as an adult it'd be easier. So I literally spent like my Saturday night or something taking just an old practice SAT verbal. And like one of the, like they had the reading comprehension sections. One of the articles they had us read it was like this, I guess this historian, she was a woman. She was like, she wasn't born in Mexico, but I think she was Mexican, and she was visiting like a family in Mexico, and like this grandmother was telling her these like oral recounts of what life used to be like. And she was like, when I got my PhD, when I got my master's degree, I had poured over all this information about Mexican history, like material information, like census data, like documents, things like that. And she said that none of that ever gave her nearly as much of an insight into what it was like to be Mexican during that time than these oral stories from like women. And because it was like decades ago, these women didn't write it down. And she was talking about how like all these diaries, all these everyday stories of everyday living paints this picture of Mexican culture that can't be found anywhere else. And she was like, this kind of like perspective was really surprising to her. And she said like, historians and anthropologists should really pay more attention to the immaterial parts of history that are lost. So like, I mean, depending on how you define technology, one could consider, I guess, diaries technology, but like a lot of that I guess my main point is studying technology and defining a civilization by that is a great disservice, but also just defining a civilization by the material goods they leave behind is also a disservice, because if she never interviewed these people, all that would just be forgotten.
It's really interesting.
And I think that's a really good point too, is like, what can we consider technologies? Because like certain like types of oral storytelling could be called like, I don't know if you call it like a technology, but it's like, a civilizational like advance. It's like a technique of a craft of doing things. And it's like, those kind of things are developed over time to be able to allow people to have this like living history, but they're fragile in a completely different way than material things are fragile, right? Like if the storage place where you kept all of the scrolls of like the written history of your people like burns, like you lose all that. But like if you go through an invasion by like a foreign people and like you lose touch with like the elders of your culture that can teach you like the oral stories, like that's the way that like that kind of stuff gets destroyed, So there's like a whole other pathway.
Or a new belief system is introduced and then that has an effect too, right?
Right, yeah.
Interesting. So just reading a little more, I often struggle with like how much should we give the reader to like give them the context, or I don't want to err on side of giving them a little bit more than just assuming, because I've been over this so much. So this is coming off for that last paragraph I read, said that they either had gone beyond it or destroyed their particular civilization. In this case, they were given another chance, having the unconscious knowledge, not only of their failure, but the reasons behind it. They then began with a psychological head start as they formed new primitive groupings. Others, solving problems, left your own physical planet for other points in the physical universe. When they reached that level of development, however, they were spiritually and psychically mature and were able to utilize energies of which you now have no practical knowledge.
Can I read the line?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go. Earth to them is now the legendary home. They formed new races and species that could no longer physically accommodate themselves to your atmospheric conditions. However, they also continued on their reincarnational level as long as they inhabited physical reality. Some of these have mutated and have long left the reincarnational cycle, however. Those who have left it have evolved into mental entities that they always were, ye see. They have discarded material form. This group of entities still takes a great interest in Earth. They lend it support and energy. In a way, they could be thought of now as Earth gods. We were the along.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. That's not a completely foreign idea to our culture, is it?
No.
Is there like, I'm trying to think of like an example, but
I would just say all of like evolution is an example. Species changing and migrating to different areas.
But any part of humanity that gets physically separated becomes like alien in a certain way, right?
Yeah. That's like one of the branches that like, okay, like you believe in aliens, but like, what do you think they are, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're like beings from other planets that evolved there. Or like another path is like, they're actually like angels. But like one of the paths is like, the aliens are actually people, but they're like left and then evolved into something else and then came back and they're actually coming back to the place that they came from originally.
Well, and then there's the idea, and I don't know how explicitly Sethian it is, but that like if a new intelligence tries to come onto this plane of reality, this resonates with me. They necessarily appear as human because that's what this plane is. Like they might look a little strange, but like you wouldn't necessarily think of them as like other than human.
Do you think?
Didn't we comment on that once earlier in this book?
I'm thinking we did.
Like you meet someone and you're like, oh, you're from another planet.
Right.
Yeah, because he says like energy that becomes humanity can come from like all these different places, like that we have no imagination for.
I guess that like surprises me because like I don't know if there's anything in like the Sethian worldview that like would imply that humanity has like a privileged position as like a type of mental existence, you know? So it like seems weird that the whole reality is like for people, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if that it would be defined that way, but I guess I'm thinking of like when Jane and Rob have had guests and they've tried to like draw, like one of them was seeing like Seth or an apparition. And they kind of did draw like...
Yeah, Seth showed his head floating like near the bathroom.
But wasn't one of the drawings kind of look like our cliche like gray alien?
You know what? I don't remember.
They just made the heads bigger and the eyes bigger. And from my understanding, it was just like symbolic of a greater intelligence and a greater perception. That's literally why they appear with like bigger eyes and bigger heads. But getting into the weeds a little bit here.
Well, like, what do you think about this though as like the sort of like underlying philosophy of it all? Like, do you think it's sort of like in this view of like how reality is, it's like it always sort of would have to end up being that way, that like if there are aliens coming from other parts of the universe, they should have all originally come from like Earth?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah. I was trying to give voice to like this idea that this reality is like a frequency, and for us to even perceive an alien, they need to be on this frequency. And maybe it's going too far to say that they would like appear as something we know, you know, from our experience, right?
Right.
I mean, I've heard this theory from like alien people who are interested in aliens that the grays, that it's just a suit.
Interesting.
Like sort of like our spacesuit.
Very biopunk.
Yeah. Which I mean, if our astronauts went to some other planet and some amoeba is able to perceive them visually, they'd be like, wow, they just have one large glass, like shiny
big
eye.
Golden eye, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is cooler.
But I mean, it makes sense because like when we rehab animals, especially birds who will imprint and stuff, and we don't want the birds to really become dependent on humans, they'll put on like a suit that sort of masks the rest of their person and just use like a bird puppet to feed the chick.
I've heard that one, yeah, that like the grays aren't really like individuals. They're just sort of like puppets of a larger like kind of like consciousness.
Yeah.
They're sort of like biological technology in like a weird way.
I mean, it's possible that said example amoeba would see the Mars rover and be like, wow, Earth.
Yeah, right, yeah. There's actually like different types of Earthlings. There's the big like the big glass eye ones, and they have these little box shaped ones.
I don't know if maybe I just didn't believe in like humans becoming the aliens in this way that he's talking about, because I do not remember reading this the first time. Like I probably just like, oh, that's bullshit, and dismissed it. I don't know. But it makes sense. Like we have people in our culture trying to do these things, right? Trying to go to Mars or stuff.
Trying to become space noids.
I think the important detail here to me is that they, what does it say? We're spiritually and psychically mature, and we're able to utilize energies of which you now have no practical knowledge. I think it can't just be a technological advancement. He doesn't say it here, but I think maybe, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but like traveling to other planets in the Sethian sense doesn't mean necessarily in a physical vehicle.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, do Sethians believe in outer space at all even? Like, isn't your guys' whole conception of space that it's like sort of like a metaphor for like distance isn't really distance or something like that?
I mean, I would say I believe in it as much as I believe in this room.
Right.
It is a physical construction, but like Seth says later in this chapter, I think that we sort of have like a gentleman's agreement of what exists where. So like me and my friend would both agree that China is supposed to be on the other side of the world, but it's just it's a mental creation, which doesn't mean it's any less valid, but it is at the end of the day a mental creation, not like a physical.
But I don't think it's like the farther you go, the more you realize that these are just props. You know, it's not like one of those deals.
Right. Where like once something gets like millions of miles away, like 1,000 miles give or take kind of doesn't matter as much as a rounding error.
Like they didn't put that much effort into like making the appearance because it was so far away.
Right.
That feels like a bad premise for a show or something. Or it could be good, I guess.
Do you think that the universe is like infinitely large, like in physical space?
I have a hard time imagining the finite version.
Right.
Infinite makes more sense to me.
Because like where would the border be?
Yeah, what would it be bounded by except our thoughts?
But then the other side of it is like, okay, like if we are projecting the reality by consensus, right? And the reality is physically extended in infinite directions and presumably has infinite things in it, therefore, how are we capable of projecting an infinite number of things into reality, right? You know what I'm saying?
No.
I think I do understand what you're saying, but like the physical universe, I'm gonna have a really hard time like explaining this without getting technical. But like in video games, where your character is, that area is loaded, and the rest of the game is not loaded, so that your computer isn't just like overheating,
right,
and melting.
Yeah.
You only load the chunk that you're in. So even though there is, say, an immensely large, if not infinite universe, I'm not loading all of that right now. Like I think Seth said once, when Jane is in one room, unless she thinks of the chair in the other room, it's not physically materialized for her. She's only focusing on what's in her room.
It's like a perception thing.
Yeah. So like, I wouldn't be loading all those assets because that would just be too much.
So it is kind of like the thing you were saying you didn't think it was for you, Liana. It's like what Michael was saying he didn't think, where it's like when it's further away, it's not fully rendered or something like that.
Well, I mean, this, for better or worse, I think this gets back to our continuing disagreement about the nature of reality. But like, I think reality needs a perceiving subject. But what the caveat to that is what Seth says, and I think Schopenhauer says, is that like everything we think of as material is made out of consciousness in a way that everything is a perceiving subject. So it's not that there's this objective container that holds reality. It's literally subjective. And so like something a million light years away doesn't exist for me now unless I was there, but it exists for the things that are there in the way that reality is for them, which we have no way of saying what that is.
Right, but that would imply that the chair perceives itself when you're not in the room, sort of thing.
But not necessarily as a chair.
No, I don't actually see any inherent contradiction between what me and Michael are saying. The chair has its own consciousness, but I think that Seth has said that each atom is like us, sort of like that lighthouse analogy I made many weeks ago, like flitting in and out of multiple realities. So that chair serves as, the atom of that chair serves as a chair in this reality, but maybe in another reality it's drywall. And it might not be tuned in or focusing on the chairness of itself if Jane isn't. But I also agree that like probably to some degree, somewhere super distant in the universe, one of us might be like making material right now if we unconsciously know about it. For example, like if a Lumanian reincarnates as a human, they might still unconsciously remember that Lumanian universe somewhere far away. Although that's a bad example because they're human. But let's say like they became some other alien species. They're still remembering Lumania here, perhaps.
Well, and I think while we're here, space is a concept we have to deal with, but I think like in the greater context, it's not necessarily a here there thing. It's all in the same place. It is a matter of perception.
Yeah, things become no longer spatially situated relative to one another.
Yeah.
Also, didn't Seth say that like things will continue to exist in some manner until you forget it? You and I were talking about this with like, he said at some point, and I don't remember where, Mark would probably be able to find where he was like, if you remember a toy, like a childhood toy that was long discarded, on your shelf where it used to sit, it will continue to exist in some manner, even if in quote unquote reality it was like eviscerated by some garbage machine somewhere.
Huh.
As long as someone remembers it, it will exist in that manner.
Yeah, you brought that one up, and I brought one up about just people being remembered by their loved ones, and cryptically Seth added at the end it's not necessarily to that person's advantage.
Right.
Yeah.
But I doubt it's like a terrible thing, but it's just maybe like delays something or slows you down, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like the thing with what's the guy where they channeled the one what did he write? He wrote the American like spiritualist book. The guy that they like channeled, but they didn't channel like his actual like
William James?
Yeah, William James.
Oh.
It's like the William James thing where like
Yeah.
they were remembering him, but they're like grabbing onto a part of him that he's sort of already left behind.
Yeah.
In a way.
I actually found the quote because I just recently texted it to you. It's from the Early Sessions Book 2. You have an old superstition in some parts of your own country that a man is not truly dead until everyone who ever knew him is dead. And this is true. It is true because everyone who is acquainted with a particular individual creates his own image of him as he creates his own image of them. As long as the memory of a particular individual is alive, that particular personality still exists upon your plane, and this is not always to his advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Had you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of that one before. People talk a lot about like that being like kind of the only way to achieve immortality is to achieve like fame, right?
Some people are like just all about that. And actually more than we think. Certain people want like sons so that their name survives, stuff like that.
I will say I have felt sort of like an intimacy with that idea, just in terms of like, I think there is something special to like interacting with, primary material from like really great thinkers from like an earlier age,
Mm-hmm.
where you really do, I feel like, get to the point where you like feel like you're in dialogue, like with the person.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice feeling.
That was my thought, is like, how does that relate to like the works people leave behind, the enduring? Because, no one has a memory of Aristotle, but like those ideas are, I don't want to say as large as ever, but they're
kind of foundational.
They might be as large as ever, like if you counting how many people are familiar with them.
I mean, considering that like he's the cornerstone of like quote unquote Western culture, which has become like the dominant international paradigm. Yeah, it's like, maybe more than ever.
Somewhere the entity Aristotle is. Why did I do that?
That reminds me of how like Seth also said information is alive and is attracted to those who seek it.
Yeah.
It's a sentient thing to some degree.
That always made me think like, to what extent does a readership or even a future readership like help create that initial thing? If you're thinking in Sethian terms where everything is kind of timeless in a weird way.
It's like you're sitting down to write your like great treatise and you're like doing the like spirit bomb, like the energy from like future readers.
There's like a magnetism that you have to like tap into, and then it just pulls it out of you.
Yeah. I found the toy shelf.
Yeah.
Excerpt. It's actually from Nature of Personal Reality, chapter 1. So it's two paragraphs. It goes, sorry, I don't have like previous context for this, but it goes, nor is its reality in space annihilated as long as it exists within your mind. Let us take a very simple example. A child has been told not to play with a doll. The order is disobeyed. The child, wittingly or unwittingly, breaks the doll and is finally thrown away. The doll exists in time quite vitally as long as the child or the adult to be remembers it. If the doll sat on a bureau, and this is also vividly recalled, then the space in which a doll sat still carries the impression of the doll, though other objects may be placed there. You react, therefore, not only to what is visible to your physical eyes in space, or to what is directly in front of you in time, but also to objects and events whose reality is still with you, though they may seem to have disappeared.
That's cool. Yeah, it just emphasizes like Seth's giving primacy to the subject, right? Because it has to be real for something, and where our material society like focuses on like, oh, that toy is no longer on the shelf, but like going down that road, that's why we have ghosts and all these things. Like that's why rooms have energy. That's why all these things that we colloquial, like we acknowledge these things, but like when we're speaking of like official reality, we don't allow those things to be part of it. That's cool. I don't remember that, but I feel like we'll get to that book at one point in this podcast.
We can repeat the like really early episodes where it was all just like
Yeah.
Didn't yesterday at book club we read that Seth too came through and said something like, ideas to us are as valid as material objects are to you, or something like that?
Might have to look it up. That was some pretty good stuff yesterday.
Yeah. But I mean, if that's to be true, then an idea I would probably interpret as more valid than just a material physical object that is the result of an idea.
Yeah.
So of course the memory of the doll would be more valid than the actual doll stuff.
Yeah, and I really like it, like with the connection with you were saying about like the civilization being born and dying, but the people go on. Like Seth emphasizes, like, any sort of artist or creator, like they're just trying to give form to something that they feel is like very meaningful and real.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I'm taking it, Joe, that you're getting into this stuff, the lower part.
They were involved in 3 particular civilizations long before the name of Atlantis.
Before the time of Atlantis.
Yeah. When in fact, your planet itself was in a somewhat different position.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. There's like so much in just like the one quote.
Random details. Like this book, he doesn't tell us what Atlantis is.
I don't actually recall if he ever does.
He always uses it as like a reference where he's like, you guys know about Atlantis. Like this is before that.
Well, what do we think about Atlantis? Like, what is the cultural definition of it? Like at the time, do we know that like they're getting this?
I thought wasn't it like some legendary utopia or something?
I think so.
Better than what life was like now.
I don't know what it would have been at the time. Because I assume like nowadays isn't the perceived knowledge that it was like highly spiritually advanced, but then like sunk into the sea, but like maybe that's a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
But like, so like way back in time, there was like the like sea people, right? Like I think there was like some kind of, was it Egypt? Like Egyptian dynasty that got like invaded and collapsed by like a foreign group of people. But like the records call the people like the sea people, like the people that came from the sea.
Like from ships or don't know.
They don't know.
Yeah.
So that's like one of those big historical questions is like, who are the sea people?
Yeah.
And like, I think all the way back into like antiquity, there was like really old thinkers that like came up with this idea of like, oh, the sea people came from this place called Atlantis. And it like used to be a place that like existed in the ocean, but like now it's not there anymore.
I want to say that somewhere Seth says that Atlantis, I probably won't get this exactly right, but like is a past of a future civilization we haven't created yet or something.
It was something like that. Yeah. I remember thinking like, okay, so I don't even know if it's if Atlantis exists like chronologically in our past or our future, but I vaguely remember thinking it existed in the future.
I mean, just having read this chapter recently and now like incorporating this idea of like this simultaneous like reincarnated civilizations, it seems like it's one version of a civilization, and it's one that's successful enough that has like bled through into our psyche throughout history as sort of like a beacon. That's would be my best guess looking at it through the lens of like this chapter.
It's got the hot chick with the white hair. And they got the like fish things that fly around.
Yeah, that's utopia, right? Yeah, if you're on a roll, Joe, keep going there, or go wherever you're drawn to here.
Okay, 3 particular civilizations before the time of Atlantis. The planet was in a different position, and then Rob asked, "Do you mean different orbit?" And then Seth says, "For now, leave the word as position, particularly in relationship to 3 of the other planets that you know. The poles were reversed, as they were incidentally for 3 long periods of your planet's history. These civilizations are highly technological, the second one being, in fact, far superior to your own."
And spoiler alert, the second one is going to be the Lumanians that he just spends most of the rest of the chapter talking about.
Yeah. So, first of all, the planet was in a different position in relationship to 3 of the other planets.
Yeah.
And the poles were reversed.
I wonder if partly why he says just leave that for now is that we don't know what the implications of that is, or like why does that need to be different, or
Right.
I have no idea. That gets into like whatever truth there may be behind like astrology, which I think Seth says is there's something to it, but it's like too complicated to even talk about, maybe something like that.
Yeah, so like if you were a Lumanian, you can't have any of the birth signs that we have now. You'd have a whole different set of like birth signs, right? Like the star charts are completely different.
Well, you can have the same signs, but they just mean different things.
Yeah.
That's really confusing.
Uh-huh. And the poles switched, which like, did they know about that back then?
I don't know, but like our science has come to the same conclusion that there was a sun reversal sort of thing, right?
Yeah, it's not that the like planet itself flips over. It's that the magnetic like field around the planet can flip. Because it's like not necessarily like stable. Like the magnetic field of the planet sort of like wobbles a little bit.
Interesting.
So like every once in a while, like they have these like cores that you can drill down into the earth, right? And you can find like magnetic material from like in different layers of rocks. And they can see that in those layers, like there's chunks where they're facing one way. And then all of a sudden there'll be a chunk for a long time where it's facing the other way. And they say what happens is like just spontaneously the equilibrium shifts and you go bam. And then north is south, like literally.
Is it literally just that quick? Like
it happens fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew about this in the 20s. They started finding, like you said, the rocks that shouldn't be there.
Okay, so yeah, this is a thing that was known about in the science, but when was it when all the civilizations were around? The poles were shift? Yeah.
You know, he doesn't get too much into the other 2 of the 3 he mentions, right? He says the first one was similar to ours, kind of got to our point and didn't get much farther.
Yeah.
That's about all he says about the first one, right?
Yeah, the first technological civilization was boring because it was just like, you know that one. They taught you that one in history, just put it like 10,000 years in the past or something.
Or the implication is like if we don't figure out something different, we're the...
And then the second one is the Lumanians, and we're going to talk a ton about the Lumanians. So the next paragraph gets into it, but we're going to talk about sound technology, right? The Lumanians got really good at sound technology.
He repeats this a lot, and yeah, I think we brought this up briefly, but like it says a conveyor of weight and mass.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should just read that whole paragraph just for context.
You want to read it?
Sure. Sound was utilized far more effectively, not only for healing and in wars, but also to power vehicles of locomotion and to bring about the movement of physical matter. Sound was a conveyor of weight and mass. Seth said the pyramids were built with sound. That's something.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about scientists are like starting to dabble in these ideas, like in our culture, right?
Yeah, I mean, they can levitate small amounts of matter with sound, but
yeah.
I think there's a threshold beyond which they haven't figured it out yet.
That's really interesting.
I just need more funding. But I did want to read the next sentence, which says, the strength of this second civilization lay mainly in the areas now known as Africa and Australia. Although at the time, not only was the climate entirely different, but the land areas. The pyramids are. So
Right, yeah.
Oh, that's true.
I didn't make that connection.
don't some people say that like maybe the Egyptians didn't build them and maybe they just found and moved in?
I think that, yeah, a lot of people have different theories or...
I feel like there's got to be a way to like date when the pyramids got made, you know? Because it's like
Yeah.
that long ago.
Right.
It's hard to say. It's also interesting is that when Seth talks about all that is or the God concept, that the term pyramid comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's like symbolic maybe in some sense of like, you know, we're all iterations of an entity and then there's all these entities and like everything just kind of like comes up to everything, you know?
Yeah, and the top is where dessert is.
The top is the all-seeing eye.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So yeah, it says, relatively speaking, the civilization was concentrated in the area and it did not attempt to expand. It was highly ingrown and dwelled upon the planet simultaneously with a large, unorganized, dispersed, primitive culture. So like Africa and Australia, presumably either like two separate nodes or like maybe the like continental shelf was moved and they were like smushed together or something.
Well, because he mentions Africa and Australia there as the main areas, but later he'll bring up the Spain and the Pyrenees as where some of the caves still exist, apparently.
Right. But like they didn't go like, so this is the Lumanians did not decide like, all right, we're taking over the whole planet with this one. We're like doing a global hegemony. They were like, we're just going to chill in Africa. We're cool.
I don't know if I'm skipping anything that if I am, just we can go back to it. But it says they were not interested in beginning from scratch again as an infant civilization, but in other areas. Therefore, much of their knowledge was instinctive with them, and this particular group then went through what you would call various technological stages very rapidly.
I do want to provide some context for that because he was earlier saying, just 2 paragraphs, that they didn't really attempt to, quote, civilize the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they actually tried to impede such progress for a long time, and that the Lumanians were largely a, quote, fringe group from the earlier successful civilization, most of whom had decided to continue existence in other areas of your physical universe, unquote. So I think that's why they were like, okay, we don't want to start over elsewhere in space. We're just gonna...
So they're successful in some contexts where they didn't need to come back to physical life, but they chose to. It made me think of earlier in this book, Seth referenced like some perfectionist tendencies can go a little too far where you're just like too obsessed. I don't know if that's explicitly the case here.
Well, I think you're right, because he says these, however, were particularly enamored of earthly life and also thought that they could improve upon the last experiment in which they had been evolved, so they were free to move on to other layers of existence. And I don't know what he means by other layers of existence. I don't know if he means like graduating the reincarnational physical cycle. But if he does, then yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah. And presumably their whole like concept is colored by the fact that they just came from the civilization that like destroyed itself.
That's true.
Yeah. And I was connecting too, because he says, yeah, like they try to impede the progress of the...
civilizing the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So like they intentionally kept the other communities on the planet like at a level of sort of just like nomadic, like dispersed living.
But down here it says the civilization therefore left natives that surrounded them in peace. Like that's a little bit of a contradiction, right? Leaving them in peace or impeding their progress.
I guess maybe refusing to help them with like the technology they knew about.
No, I don't think he doesn't mean that they were impeding the progress of the other people. He meant that they were impeding the progress of trying to civilize the rest of the world. So maybe if, say, some of them were like, we should teach them, other people would be like, no, we should leave them alone.
That makes sense.
So here's my thought, right? This is the classic like critical reading, right? Where you like, we're gonna talk a lot about the Lumanians, and they were like from the previous civilization. They're like reincarnated. They've got like a ton of knowledge, and therefore they were able to like advance, on the progress tree of technology, right? In sort of like a linear sense. Where do you think the other people came from? Do you think they just like weren't reincarnated from earlier on? Like, were they like more infantile?
I think they're just like a different sect of people, just literally just a different grouping of people, because he was talking about how individuals would tend to reincarnate together. I feel like the Lumanians, and we'll go on to we'll touch upon this later, were specifically a people who had like a certain type of problem where, I mean, I can't really like say without spoilers, but they came to like try to resolve that particular problem over and over. But the other people who were presumably warring with each other did not have that problem. Maybe had the opposite problem to solve.
Or the other one could be the actual beginning of a different civilization that they didn't want to take part in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I also think it's possible that they weren't beginners at all, because it could be any one of us being like, I wonder what it would be like to live in a world that isn't dominated by technology with social media in your face all the time.
Right.
And the way that Seth implies reality works is that even though these Lumanians incarnated at this time for their own reasons, it also fits these natives being there also fits in with their reasoning somehow. Like I'm imagining as like sort of like a reference point, because they're going to struggle, with their fear of violence basically. And that's going to provide a reference point for an actual healthier way of dealing with things.
Well, this critical point is like kind of why I bring it up. Because like you're referencing them as natives.
That's what the word Seth uses here.
Does he use natives?
Yeah.
How are they? They're all natives. Like, what do you mean native?
I think he just means it like colloquially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so that's like the point I'm making is like as a story, like as a parable, right? Like, it's very interesting that there's like, we're talking about like, oh, civilizations reincarnate. And it's like, who's the civilization here? The Lumanians. Who's not the civilization? The other people. But they're all native in the same sense. But like, for some reason, the story is about the technological people and not the other people. When we could have an internal story of why the other people were the way they were, but we don't get that, right?
No.
Right?
I mean, in the same way, we don't get the other technological civilizations either. Like, we don't get these stories, but what separates them is, the natives live above ground primarily, and the Lumanians are kind of a cave dwelling.
Cave dwelling, yeah.
A technological cave dwelling people, which is kind of foreign to our imagination, I think.
It's the hollow earth.
Yeah.
They're like the mole people.
Don't look to the skies
for aliens. Look under the
ground. This kind of gets into some of their hangups here. They were particularly concerned in the beginning with developing a human being who would have built-in safeguards against violence. With them, the desire for peace was almost what you would call an instinct. There were changes in the physical mechanism. When the mind signaled strong aggression, the body would not react. Now, psychologically, you can see vestiges of this in certain individuals who will faint or even attack their own physical system before allowing themselves to do what they think of as violence to another. Do you guys have any anecdotal knowledge of anyone like fainting or attacking their own system or this sort of thing? Yeah.
Not people, but like fainting goats do that, where when they get excited, just get rigid and fall over. And there's also this really cute species of snake called the hognose snake. You guys should look up videos. It's so cute.
Flip over.
Yeah, they pretend to be dead, and even if you physically handle them and rewrite their bodies back up, they'll flip over because they just really want you to live.
Like, no, I'm dead. I'm dead.
Just like a kid. Just like a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I was a kid, we had to lay down with our eyes closed and stick out our tongue.
That's so cute. That's so cute.
Dead people have their tongues out.
Yeah.
Fact. No, my sister's like that.
She's got the like fainting thing. Yeah.
But is it a response to doing violence to another?
She just gets it if she's like if she's like really stressed. So like if she's in like a confrontational situation, like a conflict, like she still gets like fight or flight or whatever. But like one of the options is also just faint. Where like sometimes she'll like.
It's cool. It's another F.
Yeah, like actually faint. Like she's she gets worried about it.
Because there's fight, flight, freeze. Well, there's a new fourth F, and then we can add faint.
There's the one that's like you're supposed to like try to appease the person.
Fawn.
Yeah, fawn.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, the fifth one is faint.
The energy often in your time given over to violence went instead into other pursuits, but began to turn against them. They were not learning to deal with violence or aggression. They were attempting to short circuit physically, and this, they found, had complications. This made me think of, we're in the Midwest here. We have passive aggressiveness, but this is aggressive passiveness.
Oh.
Yeah.
I like that.
Doesn't mean we're healthy for being passive aggressive if we are, but
We're kind of like... It all gets turned like inward, right? The whole idea of like, oh, instead of just being able to like express my aggression at someone, I'm just gonna like turn it into this like really snide, really like cold sort of way of like dealing with them.
well, I think passive aggressiveness would technically be healthier because you're expressing it somehow.
No, I don't think it's healthier at all.
Healthier than what the Lumanians.
Oh,
Not healthier than like just being direct and confronting things and talking about your feelings.
But this is kind of a hint that this is kind of their obsession and their downfall, basically. Which I think it's really interesting in the context that like this reality is set up for you to learn certain lessons. And if you're refusing to learn them, then you're not going to succeed. I mean, they basically become weakly and die out, right?
Yeah, they lose vitalism. Because where's the part where he talks about the here it is. It's like the next one. Now, energy must be allowed to flow freely through the physical system, controlled and directed mentally or psychically if you prefer. The physical alteration was a strain on the entire system. The creative function and basis that has been distorted into the idea of aggression, the urge to act, was not understood. In a manner of speaking, breathing itself is a violence. The built-in inhibition resulted in a tied-up system of mutual controls in which the necessary thrusting out of action became literally impossible. That's an interesting idea, right? Like that, like the aggressive tendency, the like thrusting outness of like action and like impulse, right? It's like a vital function that like is inherently like has aggression in it. Like you can't escape from it. Like being a living being is to like,
Right.
in some sense, as Nietzsche would say, assert your will to power, right?
That's why some people of the Jainism, they actually wear masks to prevent their breath from like killing microorganisms.
Whoa.
But that's to me, as far as I know, the extreme of like nonviolence in our own civilization.
Yeah.
But it's a form of extreme form of Buddhism where they're like literally like always watch where they step so they don't like squish an ant or something.
Yeah, they do the little sweep walk where they like move the bugs away.
Yeah. And in my foray into Buddhism, I had to, I decided to become vegetarian for ethical reasons, and I have to decide, where do I draw the line? Am I going to buy a belt that has leather in it? Like everyone has to like kind of draw the line somewhere unless you go to that extreme. And with that particular issue, I was like, well, I think I'm okay if I was an ant allowing the rest of the world to freely step and, be themselves rather than worrying about killing everything. I'm okay with the risk of getting smushed. And that's allows me to draw the line. It's easy for me to say maybe as a human speaking for an ant, but we all have to have that struggle. And I think what he's getting at in these 3 paragraphs is like this, if this reality is designed, it's designed for you to contend with this violence and what it means to others. And I think ultimately it gets you to the point that you understand that we're all kind of one, not to like make it too cliche or...
No, in like a sort of like Cthulhu-esque sense. Like we're an Ouroboros with a million mouths eating itself constantly and feeling itself being violently, consumed. Like it's like poetic, but it's also like incredibly destructive, right? There's like that weird, like just incomprehensibleness of the idea that like if we all are one and we are all consuming ourselves, like where do you even like how do you walk away with that,
Yeah, what is the takeaway? Like what are you supposed to learn from that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you like talked about like how do we like socially draw the line like with vegetarianism and pacifism. It's like interesting to me that the Lumanians, because like later it's going to talk about them sort of like trying to integrate some of their people into the other culture,
Yeah.
like the dispersed, like people that are not part of their civilization, to sort of like teach them like pacifism, because presumably it's like a sort of like a biologically coded thing that like their bodies like can't, you know, like react violently in the same way. So they're trying to do this sort of like intermarrying like project. But it's interesting to me that like they don't integrate the quote unquote like savagery of the outside people into their civilization, because like they could allow the other people to do violence for them and then profit from, you know, the materials that are, because like you're talking about like the belt, like if you're buying a leather belt, you're not going out and killing a cow,
Right.
but you're paying someone to kill a cow for you.
No, I don't think they would have agreed to that, because they were talking, like Seth mentioned, that at some point they were trying to develop a food source that would involve non-killing. So I think they would not have accepted killing by proxy. I don't think it was a matter of I don't want to do the dirty work. I think it was just that they were like, oh, we can never hurt anybody ever.
Yeah, they took it to like a really like ideologically pure extreme.
Yeah.
Where it's like you said, they won't even accept killing by proxy.
And I respect a lot of people. Like a lot of people won't eat meat unless they've hunted and killed it themselves.
Right.
Or like the idea being that like if you're not willing to like look that being in the eye when you take its life, and I feel like there is probably like some sort of like, you know, spiritual exercise that's necessary for you to be okay with that exchange. And I have a lot of respect for that, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I don't think that the culture that he's talking about here would be okay with it. And like you mentioned, it sounds like they almost were doomed from the beginning, because they like set up their biology to like not be able to process the energy in this way.
Right. Yeah.
And so like part of their attempt to intermingle with, you know, the so-called natives that were outside of their civilization was to strengthen their own biology. But they also wanted to kind of bring their delusion into that culture too. It seems like
Yeah.
they're, to the end, they're trying to accomplish this goal that they came in with that was perhaps doomed in the way they were pursuing it.
Right.
I want to bring up a quote from something we read yesterday at book club that actually kind of surprised me. The context is just that Seth is talking about, actually this might be Seth too, but they're talking about reincarnation and how eventually it's going to be common knowledge, I believe. So he says, you have agreed, a large number of you, to ignore the existence of reincarnation. When you decide to accept this, then of course, adequate proof for it will be found. As far as what you consider the race of man to be, unsuspected value fulfillments and progress will follow after this mass recognition. This will change civilization as you know it. This will not come, however, for many reasons, for some time. Value fulfillment would not be achieved in some important directions if man ceased killing because he knew death did not exist. He must cease killing while he believes death does exist. He must solve the problem in the context that it developed.
I love that. Yeah.
It was really profound to me, because I was like, well, I mean, if we just do enough, if people actually did enough research, they'd realize like we're not just human, and so we would solve all the problems. But he's saying we need to learn this, quote unquote, like the hard way.
Yeah, because it's not enough to say like death isn't real, therefore I can kill
Yeah, or
it.
like I shouldn't kill you because I might be you, but it's like you should just respect life and not kill because of that, not because you might be that person or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it still always goes back to learning, you know, like, you know, the Spider-Man cliche with great power comes great responsibility. But like, if we are like nascent gods, you know, we need to understand all the nuances of the hard way, because if we can develop the power to create, you know, our own worlds, we want to be able to do so without like causing suffering.
Right.
Right.
And so I think it would just be hacky and cheaty if the Lumanians were like, yep, I learned nonviolence because I was birthed into like a physical being that couldn't commit violence.
Yeah, right. Like it kind of defeats the whole purpose of even incarnating.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that was really profound. Thank you for that. Do you think that was Seth 2?
Oh,
Do you remember Seth 2?
I could check.
Can we talk about it briefly?
What was Seth 2?
It was just like what Seth is to Jane, Seth 2 is to Seth. There's like this other level that like...
Oh yeah, you read that thing in Seth 2? I read this one in Seth.
That was Seth too, yeah.
I thought it came up before, but I just wanted to ask you.
About stuff too.
Yeah.
It's just a silly naming convention.
I don't know why he does that. He did it with Augustus 1 and Augustus 2, and then Framework 1 and Framework 2. And I'm like, can you give them more subjective names that kind of highlight what they
Yeah,
are?
right. Otherwise, we have to just like continue pulling up the quotes and be like, what does that mean again?
Yeah.
I can see the advantages and disadvantages of either way, because like if you just make up a name for it, then it does become like mythologized in a weird way.
Yeah, it removes this, yeah. I mean, it comes with all these connotations. I think that's why he didn't label Augustus 1 as like, oh, this is the right Augustus, and this is the wrong Augustus. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, you're going to read about that in the next book.
Augustus?
Yeah.
Is Augustus 2 not the higher level of Augustus?
No.
Seth, why do you do this? It's inconsistent.
But he's talking about a person with schizophrenia, right? Or
What we would call schizophrenia, but he never labels it as such, because the real problem is the splitting of beliefs.
right.
Oh.
I'm just going to read this next sentence. An overly conscientious, restrictive mental physical state evolved in which the organism's natural physical need for survival was in every way hampered. Let's finish the paragraph. Mentally, the civilization progressed. Its technology was extremely activated and propelled onward as it strove to develop, for example, artificial food so that it would not need to kill for survival. That first term, overly conscientious, is something that comes up as a term, a Sethian term, in the Personal Sessions, book 1 and 5. And there's some interesting stuff on that. I don't know if you're familiar, but I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
What does overly conscientious mean?
He's like comparing it with the spontaneous self a lot. And overly conscientious is kind of like this, the way I understand it, is just a part of yourself that just is too controlling, basically.
Not controlling of other people necessarily, but too strict on yourself. So one of the things he highlighted a lot in Interpersonal Sessions 5 was that Jane was too overly conscientious because of beliefs that and like habits that she developed when she was a kid, where she was like, oh, I can't run, I can't be free, I can't be a child, I have to be like so strict with myself and rigorous. Like a writer is like this, a woman is like this. I can't like deviate from these boundaries that I erect for myself. And that was like one of her issues that was holding her back, like in her career and her health and all this other stuff.
I think it's a natural pitfall for what Seth describes in how he describes the outer ego in the creative dilemmas, that it's this part of action that tries to separate itself and view like action as objects, basically. It describes our material world and our outer ego. But he says once the overly conscientious self understands the idea that there's validity to the spontaneous self, then it eases up and it balances out. So the idea of the spontaneous self is, the way I understand it again, and add whatever you think, is that like you literally act spontaneous. You follow your instinct, because when you let go, you're actually allowing a higher part of yourself to like shift you in the right direction. In the way that Seth is saying, we create our own reality. A lot of times we have to let go of this intellectualized, overly conscientious part of ourselves that is like controlling. Like we think the path to get to B is this and this and this and this and this. And in our conception, that's the only way it works. But once we let go of that, our spontaneous self can just pull us in a random direction, and all of a sudden we get to B.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had experiences like this, and it's actually pretty cool just incorporating spontaneity into your life, and having this idea that it can turn into something good. It has been very fruitful.
This all feels very like downstream of like Freud to me. You know, like the idea of like your childhood sort of like traumas, like solidifying you into sort of this like very restrictive like sense of like possibility, and like having to like sort of open up to like this larger part of your consciousness that sort of like allows you to be spontaneous and like you'd be more like authentic and stuff.
Yeah. We touched on it with like the idea, like our civilization never gives us the idea that there could be other technological civilizations. Like in the same way, this is another example of how we can see like beliefs really do have a power over our reality, whether we think they go so far as how Seth says we create our own reality, but like it's obvious at a basic level that your beliefs will control your experience by what you think is possible and what you think you are and what you think reality is.
Right. Yeah.
So in that sense, like I think there's value for even people that aren't wholly buying into this stuff to examine your beliefs in the way that Seth is continually stressing.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially if you look at creatives. Just creatives as in general. Musicians and artists, a lot of their biggest hits or the thing that propelled them into great success or fame was something that just came out of nowhere. That if they just sat down and really analyzed intellectually, they would have been like, well, this song isn't really that good because of this, that, and the other. The lyrics like aren't really that profound. Maybe I should like redo this. But no, the song comes to them in 20 minutes, they write it down, it just becomes like their greatest hit, even though they might have spent days, weeks on other songs. And I think it also occurs a lot in like business, where if you read about like really successful businesses from people who just plucked an idea out of nowhere, the kind of idea where you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? It's so genius. They like, if you look at their initial idea, it was something else. And if they had really stuck to it intellectually and been like, well, no, this new idea doesn't make any sense, they wouldn't have pivoted their business to something that actually took off, that didn't have too many markers for success, but they just felt like doing it because their higher self probably dropped that idea into framework 2 for them. And they were like, here you go.
Right.
Yeah. Those are great examples, especially like the music one. I feel like a lot of like one-hit wonder sort of artists like are tortured by how like this one thing became, it developed in this mysterious way, and like they've tried to recreate it with probably that overly conscientious part of their self, and it just never works the same way.
And connecting with like what we were talking about in here, like I feel like that's sort of where this like aggressive thrusting outness like comes into play, right? Is like the vital energy to sort of like realize like I had a plan, but I'm now I'm in a situation and I need to actually be able to like act and like adjust what I'm doing, as opposed to just sticking with my like preconceived notions. And like there is sort of like a psychological violence like involved in that, of like sort of being like, no, I'm going to do this other thing, like even though it's risky,
Yeah, and there's a strong parallel to like some of our own religions with this, right? Because they're finding themselves in situations where they need to like defend themselves, and they can't because violence to them is such a great sin that they can't allow them even to make this mistake. Even if it is a mistake, like they don't realize that like not expressing this energy, not contending with this challenge and development is worse than the sin of violence in this sense.
You say that and all I can think of is because you're right. Like I think a lot of social issues would be resolved if people would just accept the quote unquote violence of being honest, because I think that it's a greater sin to be dishonest, and that breeds resentment and bitterness and like the lost potentials of friendships and greater understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really relevant psychology, especially with, I feel like almost all relationships have some element of this where like people just need to be allowed to express themselves, like even if it's tough, because that energy goes somewhere else and builds into something more toxic otherwise. That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review. And if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fun good evening.